Okay, so we are, I believe it's 73B2 at the beginning. Ein Gimel Lamed Beis. So it's what it's the third wide line. So we're talking about certain cases. Well, we were talking about if there was, for example, if someone made a kedushin, but there was something possibly wrong with the kedushin, or it wasn't a good kedushin, but then they subsequently consummated the marriage. The fact that was consummated shows that ein adam osa bilas a person doesn't make his beila for a promiscuous purpose, so he must have wanted to be married. So even if the original kedushin wasn't good, when he had relations with her, his intent was to affect a kosher kedushin. So we have a machlokas Amoraim about that, and we seem to have a machlokas Tanaim about that. So Amar Rabba says that the machlokas between Rav and Shmuel is machlokas b'tosh shtei nashim. The machlokas is when they have a machlokas about two women. But if there's a misunderstanding or a mistake about one woman, they all agree that she does not require a get. The kedushin is not good at all, and I think it was Rav who holds that normally we say in this case, he would claim that that relation was not done to affect the marriage or to confirm the marriage in case of there was the doubt. So Amar Abaye v'hamas nisan tosisha achasi v'kamosmina tuftamine. But our Mishnah is the woman had nadarim and she loses her ksuva, and we tried to disprove Shmuel from our Mishnah. So there's only one woman. So what do you mean that if that everyone agrees if the mistake is only with one woman, they all agree you don't need a get. Rav's holds you need a get, and we brought a proof from our Mishnah. So Ella Yidmar Hachi Yidmar. So this is what we need to say. I'm a Rabba. Rabba must have said, Machlokas b'tos isha achas ke'ein shtei nashim. The machlokas is when you have a machlokas, when there was the machlokas between Rav and Shmuel is when there's a mistake in the kedushin with one woman, but it's as if it's two women, meaning there was two different time periods with the woman that he had. So using the case of our Mishnah, first he was Mekadesh on condition that she didn't have any vows. And then whatever happened, they got divorced. And then later, the guy was Mekadesh again, and he didn't make the stipulation. So Machlokes in Rav and Shmuel is, since when he was Mekadesh the first time he made the stipulation, do we assume that he meant the same stipulation now? And even though he didn't say it, so in which case she wouldn't be Mekudeshes? Or do we say the fact that when he was Mekadesh the second time and he didn't make the stipulation shows that he gave up on that stipulation? And they are married, even though she has this trait, which earlier he did not want in a spouse. But if it's only with one woman, everyone agrees that she does not need a get because the kedushin is no kedushin. Abaye. So Abaye asked a question against Rabba's explanation. If he was Mekadesh with some type of misunderstanding, or was less than, he gave her less than a pruta's value. So at this point, we're assuming that with mistake is, or with a misunderstanding was about her being under some vows or not. Similarly, if a not yet bar mitzvah boy was Mekadesh, I think there's some case. It's a very long time ago, and something about the brother of the Noda Yehuda, I think. getting married before his bar mitzvah. I don't remember any details about it, but in no. So if he wasn't bar mitzvah yet, even though he sent sivlonos afterwards, ain't mekudeshes. She's not mekudeshes. So sivlonos, there's a machlokas between Tosos and the Rambam about what sivlonos is, but in the basic case is that they were engaged and so they sent gifts. So the question is, these were gifts that he sent because they were engaged, or is it possible? So therefore, even if the original kedushin wasn't had some problem, the fact that he's sending her a new gift, is that like a new kedushin, or no, he has no intent to make kedushin for it because he knows he already made kedushin. He already made kedushin with her. It ended up it wasn't okay, but he thought it was okay. And these gifts are just gifts. They're not to affect kedushin because the kedushin already took effect. So that's what sivlonos are. So Aina Mekudeshes, she's not Mekudeshes. Shemachmas Kedushin Rishonim Shalach, because these sivlonos, these gifts were sent not to affect Kedushin. No, he thought that he already was Mekadesher, and so they're only as engagement presents once they're already engaged. V'im balu kanu. But if in any of these cases the marriage got consummated, Rabbi Shimon Yehuda Mishum Rabbi Shimon Amar, v'im balu kanu. But if they consummated the marriage, then he acquired her. So even though there was a problem with the original kedushin, obviously the case of the cotton, he must have. Actually, I'm not sure about that. Because the bia of a 12-year-old is considered a bia, but that it works for, let's say, yibum, where you just need kavana, you don't need real das. You don't read, and a minor isn't considered to have das. So even in this case, I assume that he would have to be 13. I mean, Rashi doesn't mention anything here that I see. It had to have been that he was Mekadesher and he was before he was 13. Then once he turned 13, he was Boal her. So even in that, so according to the Tanakama, so then the kedushin takes place with the bia, not with the original act of kedushin, which had a problem. Rabbi Shimon Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Shmuel Omer Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda said the name of Rabbi Shmuel Imbalu Lo Kanu. Even if they consummated the marriage, they're not married because they only were consummating it, assuming that the original kedushin took effect, and since it did take effect, they're not married yet. So the question that Rabbi is asking from this brayso is, in this case, it's a machloka, it's a mistake only about one woman. Upligi, and we have a machlokas between the Tanaim whether we say that the bia is like a new act of marriage or not, or because of the chazaka, what Rav and Shmuel were arguing about, because of the chazaka that a person doesn't make his bia promiscuous, the bia would have been a new kedushin and removed any doubt that there would have been. But we see that there's machlokas tanaim about this. And my lav, Taos Nadarim. And what's the mistake or the misunderstanding in the Mishnah on which he was Mekadesher? Can't we say that she had Nadarim and he didn't know that she had taken vows, that she was that we're gonna bind her in some ways?
So in these days, I guess, there was no there's no document signed for Kedushin like we do now.
We don't sign the document for Kedushin. So in those days, remember, they did the chuppah a year after the Kedushin.
Right.
The fact that we write the ksuva, according to most opinions, some opinions say that it would be before Kedushin, but it's because it's before the chuppah. We do both under the chuppah. But if all you're doing is giving the ring, you don't have to write any document until the chuppah is going to happen. And Tanaim, I don't know why we write Tanaim nowadays anyway, but they didn't have Tanaim either back then.
they didn't, okay, because, I mean, I keep talking about error here and this and that, and we have, people don't just, generally, just get married.
No, but
No,
meaning
it's-
it
We
was
have people vouching for the bride, vouching for the groom, and.
right. But let's say he said, I like, as long as you don't have any vows that you're under, I want to marry you, and here's a ring. And so she wasn't telling the truth or misled him in a way. That's the question about what the situation is.
Okay.
And then that's the question. The Gemara is going to say that that's not the case. It's a different case, but
Okay.
that is what we're assuming right now. Also, in those days, yeah, they didn't have the shidduch problems that we have nowadays.
Okay.
This whole broken system. So the Gemara says, "Lo, it's not a case where the misleading or the misunderstanding was about that she was under had vows or not. Tos pachos mishava pruta. There was an error in that the item was less than a pruta. Notice in general, the halacha is that even if you're mekadesh with something that's not worth a pruta, it's a suffix kedushin, or it's kedushin midrabanan, because there's a principle that movable goods, if you're in the right marketplace, you could sell it for something. So even if you give her something that's pretty worthless over here, we're worried that in Madai, the Gemara says Shema Shava Pruta b'Madai, maybe in media in Iran over there, which is not so close to us, maybe this item is a hot it's worth a pruta. But we're talking about on a diraisa. We're discounting that halacha over here. That it's a doubtful kedushin, because maybe it is worth a pruta. Here we're just talking about the straight diraisa level that we know that it's not worth a pruta here.
They asked me at a wedding, I was
A witness.
a witness for the ring.
Yeah, so that we say,
They asked
is
me
this
for
worth a
the
pruta?
yeah. Okay.
They just do that out of but I mean, a
They
gold
wanna
ring
know
is
was it
definitely
real gold, yeah,
right. I mean, a gold ring is definitely worth a pruta.
yeah.
But in those days, if he gave her a feather, it's a feather for her cap, I mean for her hat, but maybe it's a place where they had really nice feathers and this feather wasn't really worth much. I mean, the Gemara talks about different pieces of material. So is the material really worth a pruta or not? Or she thinks it is, but it really isn't. So there's Gemara's about that. So the Gemara says, no, the mistake was is that it was done in error. The kedushin was invalid because, unbeknownst to the chassan and the kala, the item used in place of a ring, or maybe it was a tin ring or something, it wasn't worth a pruta. So then the Gemara asks, but the Brisa first said if they made a mistake or they were mekadesh with an item that was worth less than a pruta. So those are two separate cases in the Mishnah. Kitchabatos, the first case, if he married her with a mistake or a misunderstanding, pruta, or if it was less than a pruta. So the Gemara says, Purusha kamafaresh. The Mishnah isn't saying two different cases, it was a mistake, or it was less than less than a pruta. It's explaining itself. Kitchabatos ketzad. If he married her with an error, and what is that case? Such as the value of the item that he gave her was not worth a pruta. So then, so then why do the Tanakhama and Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Shmuel argue? Mar savar adam yodeh shein kedushin tovsim bevachot mishavar pruta begamer abal l'shem kedushin. The Tanakhama holds that everyone knows that you can't affect kedushin if the item that you give the kala is less than is worth less than a pruta. So therefore, when they later consummated the marriage, they gamar abal l'shem kedushin. They had full intent to affect the kedushin through the bia. Umar savar, but Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Shmuel holds pruta. it is not so well known that that you have to use an item that's worth a pruta to affect kedushin. So when he had relations with her, he thought that he was consummating the marriage that he had already done. But since that original thing wasn't good, he's not adding anything to that with the bia now. Esave Shna Abaye against Rava from a different case. Hareini ba'alecha menashe yirtza abba. So he's saying, I am gonna have relations with you to affect kedushin, because the Mishnah does say at the beginning of kedushin, we can make kedushin with money or something with monetary value. What we just were talking about, a pruta, or with a shtar. If you write on the shtar that you are mureses to me or mikudeshes to me with the shtar, or with bia midrabanan. Bia is not a good way. The Rabbanan say it's improper to do kedushin in that way. But if he says I'm gonna do bia with you for kedushin on condition that my father wants, and that he's okay with it, even if after the fact the father didn't want, she is still mikudeshes. Rabbi Shimon Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, which is happens to be the same Tana as before, but this is in the name of Rabbi Shimon, not in the name of Rabbi Shmuel. The previous one says Ratza av mikudeshes, so Ratza av aina mikudeshes. If the father was okay with it, she's mikudeshes, and if the father didn't want, she's not mikudeshes. This is a mistake with one woman, meaning it was so it was the same woman, it was the same time. Previously, we said that when it was two different women, it didn't literally mean two different women, but it was a case where you had married her once, they got divorced, and married her a second time. And the question is, did the original stipulation still exist at the time of the second marriage? So here, this certainly can't be like that, because there were no two kedushin. There was one kedushin. He was Baal her l'shem kedushin, and the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda are arguing. Upligi, yet the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda argue, so they can't follow Rabba's answer. So the Gemara says, "Hasan b'hakam iflagi." No, they all agree that if it's one woman, everyone agrees that you don't need a get. So how come here that the Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda says that you need a get? Mar savar amanashir ta'av amanashi yishtokav. The Tanakama holds that when the man said, on condition that my father wants, that meant as long as he stays quiet, he doesn't have to protest. He doesn't have to actually consent to it and agree with it. Meaning, in this case, on the condition that my father wants, what do you need? Do you need him to affirm it, or do you need him not to deny, to criticize it? So the Tanakama holds, as long as the father doesn't criticize it, that's the father agreeing with it. Umar Savar, but Rav Shimon Yehuda says, "Avanashi Amar Abba Hain, lo Amar Hain." He meant that that the man here said, "I'm being kedushin on the condition that my father is okay with it." He needed to actually affirm it, and in this case, the father did not affirm it. So the kedushin did not take effect. Ace.
Did they have kedushin for second marriage or marriage?
Yeah, it would be the same thing. You would need to give a ring and then have a chuppah. The same process again.
Then wait for the whole year.
I don't know if they would wait a year in that case. I don't know.
Let's say widow like.
But we do them both right at the same time, and that's what we
do. I know, but
right. So I don't know if they would do it, a month apart, or they would wait the year. That I don't know. Well, we learned earlier that the Basula gave her 12 months. Once it's not a first marriage, it seems that they didn't give her so much time. So that would be to a new husband. So certainly if it was to the original husband, they probably wouldn't give her the time either. The extra time.
Yeah, I've heard of Orthodox people who were divorced getting remarried less than a year.
No. There's a halacha that if a woman, her husband died or she had a get, you have to wait. It ends up being 94 days before she could remarry to make sure that if she's pregnant, we know that we'll know, but if that if she's pregnant, we know that which husband it would be from. But if it's by 94 days, we'd be able to detect to see that she's showing that she's pregnant. But I thought you were Jeff was asking, we learned originally in time of the Gemara, you gave Kedushin, you waited 12 months, and then you had the chuppah. And he was asking, what do you need? Would you give her 12 months if you were remarrying your ex-wife? So I don't think so, because I think even if the woman was divorced or widowed, I don't think in general, I don't think we give her 12 months. I can't tell you what daf that's from, but that's my sense. So now Abaye asked Rabba's answer from a different brisa. Modem Chachamim Rabbi Eliezer Bektana Sheisei Isha v'Nisgarsha. The Chachamim agreed to Rabbi Eliezer Bektana Sheisei Isha v'Nisgarsha. When a katana who was married off, so she was not yet bas mitzvah. Her father had married her off. She got divorced. And she's considered an orphan in the lifetime of her father. Meaning, once she had chuppah, or maybe not even chuppah. Once her father had married her off, we learned that that just like the father has the power to marry her off, but we know that once she gets married, some of the power of the father, for example, we saw in regard to annulling her vows, that goes to the husband. So if she got divorced from that husband, she has now left her father's domain. So even though she's still not bas mitzvah yet, her father is not allowed to marry her off a second time. But she's still a katana, so she's not able to accept her kedushin on her own either until her bas mitzvah. So we say she's like an orphan in the life of her father, that there's no way for her to get married right now. That's what this term means. The hechazira, but if the husband remarried her and then he died, she can only do chalitza and not do yibum. Because the divorce was a full divorce. But the remarriage wasn't a real remarriage, because midiraisa, she was a ketana and she had previously been married. So there was no way for her to get married in this case. She's in a state of limbo. This state of limbo, the Mishnah calls Yisoma B'chayav, an orphan in the life of her father. Meaning, we saw a few weeks ago, we've seen the case before, that if she was a real orphan, her father died, and she's still a katana, midiraisa, she can't get married. But there's a case where we say if her father and mother married her off to someone, it is kind of a marriage, but she's allowed to annul it. If she says, but up till time that till she turns 12, I don't want this marriage, it's completely retroactively annulled. She doesn't even need a get. So the Chachamim agreed to Rabbi Eliezer in the case where she had been married off as a katana by her father, she got divorced, and she got remarried to him, but halachically there was no way for her to get remarried, because her father, once she got married to her, she's no longer under the domain of her father to marry her off, and she's a katana, so she's not old enough to accept kedushin yet. So in such a case, and then her husband died and didn't have any kids, we do not allow her to have yibum. She has to have chalitza, because she wasn't halachically married to him at the time that he died. She had been divorced from him, and this marriage wasn't a halachic marriage. When is this true? That's if he divorced her before she was 12, and then he got remarried when she was still before 12. But if he divorced her when she is before she was 12, and then after she was 12, he remarried her. So midiraisa, she's allowed to accept kedushin once she's an adult. Oh, shechzer kshiktana v'gadlo etzlo umes, or he remarried her when she was a ketana, but it's been a few years since, and she has, and while she was in the second marriage to him, she became a gedola, she became a bas mitzvah umes, and then he died. Oh, cholatzas omes yabemes. The chachamim hold that they could do chalitza for her or yibum. But Rabbi Eliezer holds, even in that case, we only do chalitza because people might make a mistake in case she was still under the age of 12. They might think in the case, if we allow her to do yibum in this case, people might make a mistake. Oh, even if he died and she's less than 12, you would do yibum. So because Rabbi Eliezer doesn't want, and again, to the prohibition of marrying your brother's wife is a prohibition that's only deferred when there's a mitzvah of yibum. Because in this case they weren't really married halachically, so there's no mitzvah of yibum. There's no mitzvah to push away the avera of marrying your brother's widow. So that's why Rabbi Eliezer says that you never do a yibum in this case, because maybe you'll allow yibum in a case where they really weren't married when she became widowed before she was 12. So we turn to Ayin Daled Amud Aleph. Mishum Rabbi Eliezer Amru Chalitza as well Misya B'Emes. But Rabbi Eliezer, in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, says in this case we only do chalitza, not yibum, because we don't want people to make a mistake in the case where she was widowed before the age of 12. And in this case, the betos isha achas dami upligi. This is like a mistake in one woman because there was no real second kedushin. When we said that it's like two women, meaning there was a marriage, there was a termination of the marriage, and then there was a second marriage. But here, there's no second marriage because she's a katana, so she can't get married. So it's only a case where there's one marriage, and according to Rabbi's explanation, in such a case, everyone agrees that there's no kedushin, and she doesn't need a get. So how could you possibly think that in this case you could do? How come there's a machlo there's a machlokas chachamim about chachamim and Rabbi Eliezer about this? So the Gemara says hasamnami b'kamiflagi. In that case, also there's a different point on which they're arguing. Marsa or Adam Yudesh Shen Kedushin Tana Klum. The Gamar Bala Shem Kedushin. The Tanakama holds, the Chachamim hold that everyone knows that you can't give Kedushin to a minor girl. The Gamar Bala Shem Kedushin. So therefore, later, once she is over Bas Mitzvah age, he makes a new bia he makes a bia with full intent that he's affecting kedushin with this bia, because the bia that the kedushin didn't, that there was no real kedushin from before. But Rabbi Eliezer holds that not everyone knows that you can't give kedushin to an 11-year-old, and he thought it was good kedushin. And when he had relations with her, he just thought he was consummating the previous kedushin, but he did not have any intent of or das of affecting kedushin with this bia. So Abaye asked 3 questions against Rabbi. We weren't able to push off Rabbi's answer. Itmar Nami. We also have a statement of a different Amora like Rabba. Amar Avacha Bar Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Bar Yaakov said the name of Rabbi Yochanan. And obviously Rabbi Yochanan was a much earlier Amora than Rabba. Hamikadesh al Tanayu Baal, if someone made a kedushin with the woman on a condition, and then later he had relations with her without the condition being fulfilled, Divrei Hakol ein tzricha mena get. Everyone agrees that she does not need a get. So in this case, everyone agrees she doesn't need a get. This is a case where it's like one woman. There was no two acts of kedushin. There was no kedushin and then a divorce and then a new kedushin. Esvei Rav Acha Bred Rav Ika bar Achte, Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ika, the nephew. So he's saying that Rav Acha Bred Rav Ika's nephew, his sister's son, asked about what he just said. Chalitza mutas kshera. A mistaken chalitza is kosher. So again, chalitza is a case where the woman died and her husband had no kids, and so his brother could either do yibum or chalitza. And chalitza is where they're not doing yibum. So in the public, she tells the Beit Din he doesn't want to do yibum, and she takes off his shoe and throws it over her shoulder, and everyone knows she spits. She doesn't have to spit at him though. She just has to spit. That's a misconception. So eze chalitza mutas. So what is a case of mistaken chalitza? Amrei Shlakish. Reish Lakish says kosher amr lachalotzla uvekach hakonsa. Someone told the guy, if you do this chalitza ceremony, you are acquiring her as a wife, which is the exact opposite. Chalitza is terminating their relationship. Rabbi Yochanan, ani shone ben sheniskavin hu v'lo niskavnehi. I learned whether he had kavanah to do chalitza, but she didn't. Ben sheniskavnehi v'lo niskavin hu. Whether she had intent for the chalitza process and he did not. Chalitza psula, the chalitza is no good. Until they both have the proper intent that it's to separate them. The ad amart chalitza and you Reish Lakish are saying that chalitza is okay when someone told the brother or her brother-in-law that he was marrying her by doing this chalitza. So Elam Rabbi Yochanan says, what's the pshat of mistaken chalitza? If someone says give her chalitza on the condition that she's going to give you 200 zuz, and then she never gave the money, so you might think it's like a tanai, like it's like a condition. But no, Rabbi Yochanan holds that's a mistake. That's a mistaken chalitza, which does work. So Alma Kavan to Avad Maisa Achule Achle Tanai. So in that case, because he did the act of chalitza, the tanai, he forgave the tanai of receiving the money. Hachanami. So why don't we say in our case where he was mekadosh her on condition that she didn't have any vows binding her, Kavan de Baal Achule Achle Tanai. Once he had relations with her, that's an action, and so the action is what undoes the tanai. So even though there was a tanai, but a later action can undo the tanai. That's the question. So Amar Le, so Rav Acha bar Yaakov said, Barbe Rav, you're a Talmid Chacham, Shaper Kamarta, are you saying good? No. I mean, so this is a little bit sarcastic. I don't know if the Barbe Rav is also sarcastic or not. You think you're Talmid Chacham? I don't know if that's what he's saying. It might be, but it might not be. Michti, let's see. How do we know the laws of making a condition for anything? It could be for kedushin, it could be for a business stipulation. What's the source for making it tonight? It's in. We're going to read it next week, a week from Shabbos. From the condition of the sons of Gad and Bnei Reuven. So when Bnei Israel captured some lands, even though it was on the east bank, the inappropriate named east bank of the Jordan River in modern day Jordan, undisputed modern day Jordan, on the east side of the Jordan River, they said this is good land for our animals. We want to stay here and not go into Eretz Yisrael. We don't need land in Eretz Yisrael. So Moshe said, if you go and fight on the front lines with your brethren to capture Eretz Yisrael, you can live here. And if you don't go and fight with your brethren for Eretz Yisrael, you're not going to get this land. So because the prototype case of Tanai is from Bnei Gad Bnei Ruvain, something that can be done through an agent doing it is a good having tonight. That's a good tonight because Moshe died, and he told when Yoshua took over, he told Yoshua that if they follow the agreement that they made, then they'll be able to keep the land on the east bank of the Jordan River. But if an act is not able to be done through an agent, the way that Moshe and Yoshua did through it as an agent, lo havi tana, it's not a condition. So since chalitza cannot be done through an agent, since chalitza can't be done through an agent, we shouldn't allow any tanai by chalitza at all. So tonight for chalitza is no good. So that's Rabbi Yochanan holds that that's a mistaken chalitza because the tanai never took it. The tanai never took effect. No, that wasn't the question. Though. It wasn't about Rabbi Yochanan. The question was, doesn't the Maisa undo the Tanai? That was the question. So he said, no, a Tanai that was never able to be done through an agent doesn't take effect in the first place. Then the Gemara asks, but kedushin through bia cannot be done through an agent. You can't say to someone, you do bia with her and she'll be married to me. It doesn't work that way. You could have him give her the ring or have him give her the star on your behalf. But bia can't be kedushin through bia can't be done through a shliach. But we learned that a condition about bia that if his father would consent, it is potentially a good tanai. So this kind of blows up this explanation that Rav Achabar Yaakov said that something's only a good tanai if it can be done through a shliach, through an agent. So Gemara says no. The three ways of kedushin, kesef, shtar, and bia, are all compared to each other because there's a limud that we learned that they're all written that they're all compared to each other. So anything that works by one could work by the other. So it's true, even though normally a tanai wouldn't work by bia because there's no shliach, but because shlichus could work when you're being mekadesh with the shtar or with kesef, it also works for tonight. So it's an exception because of a special halacha about kedushin. Amar Rav Ula bar Abba, Amar Ula, Amar Rabbi Lazar. Rav Ula bar Abba said the name of Ula in the name of Rabbi Lazar. So there's a Rav Ula bar Abba quoting a regular Rav Ula Stam, who doesn't have a father's name attached to him. Hamakadesh b'milva ubal. So a milva is a loan. So let's say Ruvain lent Sarah money. And then instead of paying back the loan, Ruvain said, oh, instead of paying me back the loan, I'll forgive the loan and you'll be mukudeshes to me. So the halacha is that doesn't work because milva is once you give the loan, once the lender gives the money to the borrower could do whatever they want with the money. Even if they didn't touch it and they kept it in their pocket the whole time, it's considered that they spent it. We don't know where it went. So because kedushin needs to be affected when the man gives money or shava kesef, something of monetary value to the woman, by canceling a loan, she is not getting anything now. So that's why being mekadesh by forgiving a loan, kedushin by forgiving a loan does not take effect because she is not getting anything at this moment. So if he was mekadesh her through canceling a loan and he then consummated the marriage, or what he thought was a marriage, al tanayu baal, he was mekadesh her through with a condition, and he consummated the marriage. The pachas b'shavar pruta baal, or he gave her less than a shavar pruta as kedushin, and then he consummated what he thought was the marriage. Divrei hakol tzrichem and a get. According to everyone, you need a get. So we're assuming that the fact that he was boal her, he didn't, or at least in the case of the second case of Tanai, he was now canceling his Tanai because he didn't reiterate it at the time that he was uh being boal her. Rashi says even in the case that wasn't the point, but the point of this was the case of what's the case? So Rashi says even if she misled him about the condition, it still takes effect because of the opinion that a person doesn't make his bia znus. Amar Rabbi Yosef bar Abba Amar Rabbi Menachem Amar Rabbi Ami Hamakadosh b'Pachas b'Shavar Pruta Bal Tzrichem and a get. But these Amoraim hold that if you gave her something that was not worth a pruta, and then you gave a bia, you do need a get. But the cases where she may have misled him about it tonight, still they agree with the other Amoraim that she does not need a get. So why is that different? Bahahu delotai. Because in the case of not using something that's not worth a pruta, people know that that's not okay. So that's commonly known. But if there was a case where he was mekadosh her by canceling her loan, or there was a stipulation that ended up not getting fulfilled, people might think that the kedushin takes place. So therefore, in those cases, even he agrees that you don't need a get, because he thought that his original kedushin was the real kedushin, and now he's just consummating the marriage. He didn't think that anything was wrong, so he has no special intention at this time to be mekadosh her with this bia. Rav Kana mishmei de'ula hamekadosh al tanai ubal trichem and a get. Rav Kana said in the name of Ula that we just had Rav Ula Amar Ula. If you're mekadesh on a condition and then they consummated trichem and a get, you do need a get. This happened once, and the chachamim did not have the power to let her out of the marriage without a get. Lafukime hatana, to exclude the following opinion. Dam Rabbi Huda Mishma Mishum Rabbi Yishma, because Rabbi Huda said in the name of Shmuel, in the name of Rabbi Yishma, V'hilo nispasa asura. So in a case of the sota, when she was not grabbed, then she become forbidden to her husband. Hanispasa muteres. But if she would have been taken with force, so that's almost like a rape. So when is she forbidden to be with her husband? If she committed adultery. If she was forced against her husband in case of rape does not forbid the woman to stay with her husband, unless the husband's a Kohen, but it's a separate issue. And we learned about that in the second parak. But there's another case, even though she was not forcibly taken, she remains permitted to stay with her husband. And what's that case? If her original kedushin were mistake, even if her son was riding on her shoulder, she can announce that she refuses the marriage, and it gets totally annulled retroactively. Meaning, this is the case where she was married from this mistaken case, and then we see that she had a kid with him, but because the Tanai was never fulfilled, so obviously she had a kid with him, they consummated the marriage. But because the Tanai was never fulfilled, the kedusha never took effect. So we see that there is an opinion that holds that Adam also bilazados, but there's two opinions, obviously. That's why it's a machlokas. Okay, now we're on Ayin Dalam base. Tanarban, we learned in the Brisa, halcha eitzel chacha b'tiru mikudesha. So he was mekadosh on the condition that she didn't have vows. She did have vows, but she went to a chacham, and the chacham was able to be mater neder, or a tarofa veripo. So she had one of the blemishes that would disqualify a kohen and cause the marriage to not take effect. She went to a doctor and was able to fix that defect. Ain't mekudeshes. In that case, she is not mekudeshes, even though she no longer has the mum. Ma ben chacham lerofe. Why is there a difference between the chacham annulling the vow and the doctor healing her mum? The difference is chacham okres aneder meikaro. The chacham retroactively uproots. The Gemara doesn't use the word retroactively, but that's what he means. He uproots the neder from its very beginning. The meaning it gets retroactively annulled. It's as if she never had the vow. But rofe eino merape elamikana lahaba. But a doctor doesn't mean that she would never had this disfigurement or this moment. She did. But the doctor now, from this point on, she doesn't have the disfigurement. But at the time of the kedushin, she did. So even though it got fixed, the kedushin is not valid. I mean, obviously it could be mekadosh again, but the original kedushin is not valid. But we have a different brisa that says that if she went to a chacham and he annulled her vow, or she went to the doctor and he healed her from her blemish, even in the case of neder. How come that brisa says that the neder, even though the chacham was mater neder, they are not married? Rabba, it says Rava, but the changes gears to the Rabba. Lo kasha harimer harabi lazar. It's a machlok between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Lazar. Ha Rabbi Meir the Amar Adam Rotza Shetizvaza Ishta Bevestin. This one that says that the chacham can annul when the chacham annuls the vow. Now it's considered she doesn't have any vow, so the kedushin is good. That's according to the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who holds that a person is not opposed to his wife having to go to Beis Din and find a chacham to annul the vow. Ha Rabbi Lazar, but the second brisa that said that the chachamim that even in a case where the chacham annulled the vow, the kedushin does not take effect. That's the opinion Rabbi Lozer holds. A person doesn't want the fact that his wife has to go through the ordeal. I mean, literally, this means shetis she's being debased. It's not a good word, but she's being embarrassed or humiliated by having to go to Beis Din. It doesn't really mean that humiliated, but having to go through the process of going to the chacham to be mater neder. Maihi. So what's the machlokas? Where do we know that the Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Lezer argue about this point? The Tanan, because there's a Mishnah in Gittin and in Yevamos. Hamot yasishta mishum neder lo yachzer mishum shame lo yachzer. If a person had divorced his wife because she took the nidarm that he didn't want, he's not allowed to remarry her later. Mishum shemer lo yachzer. If he said, and this is something we did learn, if he says, we learned about this in what the second or the third parak. If a person said that my wife was not a basula, she wasn't a virgin, and he was lying. Really, she was. But in this case, he was Motzi Shemra and they got divorced. Lo Yatzer, he's not allowed to take her back. The Rashi talks about, says that there's two ways to that the Gemara says. The second reason that the Gemara says is the shorter one to explain, that the Chachamim don't want a woman to benefit, or not literally benefit, but if we say that they can be not so careful about arayos and not so careful about nedarim, and still get what they want. So we can't. So we don't let them make neder and then get annulled and then get remarried, because then they'll say, oh, the whole thing in neder is a joke, and then they won't treat nedarim seriously, something like that. That's the second answer. The first answer is kilkel. Rabbi Huda Mer kol neder sheyedu bo rabim lo yachzer. Rabbi Huda says a neder that is known but in public, meaning she made the neder in front of 10 people, that can never be, then he can't remarry her. Because such a vow can never be annulled. Lo yodu bo rabim yachzer. But if the Rabbi Yehuda's the second part of his statement is if it was not made in public, then if it gets annulled, yachzer, he is allowed to remarry her. Rabbi Meir Omer kol neder shetzarich hakiras chacham lo yachzer. Rabbi Meir holds if it's a neder that needs a chacham to investigate it, he's not allowed to, and then they divorce because of that. He's not allowed to. The husband's not allowed to remarry her. But if it's a vow that does not need a chacham to investigate it in order to annul it, yachzer, he's allowed to marry her later. So what type of neder doesn't need the chakiras chacham? That's something that the husband's able to annul because it's something that's either between him and her about an intimate thing, or it's about her afflicting herself. 2 more minutes. Amar Rabbi Lazar says, they didn't forbid the case where you needed the chacham, except because of the case where you didn't need the chacham to annul it. So basically, it's like they made xera, because there's some cases where you can't marry, where it wouldn't work. So we, in both cases, all neder, we say blanket thing for neder, you can't remarry it. I mean, you can't remarry her. My time at Rabbi Yehuda. What's the reason for Rabbi Yehuda that about the vow taken in public? To Kesuvos, the pasuk says, and we turn to Ayin Hamad Aleph. Below hikum b'nei Yisrael. The b'nei Yisrael did not kill the Givonim. Ki nishbu lehem nesiya eda, because the Nesiim had made an oath for that. So since it was a public thing that they said, we're not going to harm you, the b'nei Yisrael later would not kill them to keep that word. V'chama Rabim, what's considered public? Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar Shlosha. Yamim Shnayim Rabim Shlosha. Rabbi Yitzchak Amar Asara Eda Ksibahu. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says it's 3 because when you say day is already plural, that's 2, and when it says Yamim Rabim, many days, Rabim is adding 1 more to the plural of 2, so 3. And Rabbi Yitzchak says it's 10 because it's Eda. It's like the well, you need a minion for with the Meraglim were 10 wicked men and stuff. So that's considered a vow that's considered known to public, whether it's 3 or 10. We'll leave it here.